So taking a look at this hole, I first want to get a measurement, so using my tape measure. How big is the hole that you're working with? So this hole end to end is about 2 inches, about 2 inches by 2 inches. So I want to make sure that I make my hole a little bit bigger than that. And what I want to do is I want to what's called square it up. I want to make it into a square, because a square is a nice shape to cut. Cutting a circle could be a little odd. So your squares are going to give you your best measurements. So what I want to do is I'm going to measure out, and I'm going to make this a little bit 2 inches bigger than the hole itself. So looking at this, I'm going to find my middle, which is about 2 inches there. And I'm going to mark here and here, top and bottom, here and here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to line up one on the bottom, give that a square. And now we have a square. If we go back to measure it, we should be at 4 by 4. So looking at this one, there's 4 inches here, and there's 4 inches here. A tool that I would suggest having for this is a utility knife for cutting your sheetrock. It leaves a nice clean cut and works very well. However, it does take a lot of effort. For cutting a hole into the wall itself, I would recommend something like a hole saw, or this sheetrock saw here. So to operate this, we're just going to push it into one side of it and move it back and forth until I get to a line. And there we are. So now as you look at it, we have a nice clean square that we can work with. The next step we're going to want to do is we're going to want to cut out our patch. So I have a new piece here for my patching. So what I've got is I purchased this from Home Depot. It's a 2-foot by 2-foot square, so you don't have to do the full 4 by 8-foot sheets if you just need it for patching. And I'm going to make sure that I know that I have a hole that's going to be 4 inches by 4 inches. I want to make sure that I have an extra inch on each side for my patch. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a square that is 6 by 6. I'm going to measure out here, 6 inches. Go up 6 inches. Now that we've cut out our patch, what I'm going to do for it is I'm going to measure out the back of my new patch. Now, if you remember, the hole we cut is 4 inches by 4 inches. We've cut a 6-inch by 6-inch piece. What I want to do is I want to measure out on both sides at least 1 inch. So if I come around here, measure out 1 inch from here and here. This extra inch is going to give me a flap that I can use to attach to the wall with, so I don't have to add any extra supports to it behind it. So what I'm going to do in order to create this patch, I already started on one side of it here, is I'm going to take my knife and I'm going to score it down the line. Once I have a good score, what I want to do is I want to then break the piece. Not break it all the way, because we want to leave the paper attached to it, and just start working out from a corner. Once I have that, I can pull that back, and it leaves me with a nice lip that I can use for my spackling. So I'm going to do that with the other side too. Now remember, as you're working with your knife, you always want to keep your fingers away from the blade. That's going to be a common accident is people getting cut, so just remember knife safety. So I push that back, get to the corner of it, and just peel it back nice and slow. All right. And that leaves us with a 4x4 square on the back to patch our hole with, and these flaps that we can use to spackle to the wall to create our new patch. And there we go. So once we get it to fit, that will be our new patch. Now we have to move on to spackle. I get into my spackle bucket here, and I want to get a nice big scoop going. And I put that on the end of my spackle knife here. Now this is going to allow me to transport it and work with small portions of it as I'm putting it onto the wall.
And how are you gauging how much of that you need on there?
Yeah, well at the moment I'm just taking a nice big scoop because I know that I'm going to have to do the starting edges all the way around the wall, put my patch on, and then I'm going to have to start covering my patch with the spackle. So I'm going to have to go back in and get a little bit more. But start with a little bit on your knife here. And a great part about that is if you put in too much, you could always scrape it back off into your bucket and reuse it later. So I'm just going to take this, first there, and I'm just going to add a little bit to the top. And as you see, this one isn't necessarily pretty. It doesn't have to be nice at first, because remember, this is going on the underside of your wall. So this is the putty that we're going to use as a little bit of glue for the back of your patch. So if it looks a little rough like that, that's okay for the moment. So a nice trick, or a nice tip when working with spackle, is that you always want to clean off the ends of your spackle knives, like this. This allows you to make a nice clean sweep and a clean cut as you move through with your spackle knife, and prevents there from lumping and bumping, which are going to get in the way of your spackle and leave lines as you drag it across. So what I want to do now is I want to fit my patch up to it. All right. And I can give that a little push into the spackle there. So as you can see, that starts to hold the patch right onto the wall itself. So what we want to do now is we want to take our spackle knife once again and the little bit of spackle we have on our hawk here, and we want to start to draw out the corners.